It's Thursday, June 19th, 2025. Still a holding pattern for now on dealing with Iran, or at least getting involved. A major victory for the cause of the sane. And we're going to need to put the Poli back in politician pretty soon. Next on the AM Update.
So we're going to meet, we're going to see. We're in the midst of it's a terrible thing. I hate to see it. I hate to see all that death, so much death and destruction.
90% of the work it takes to get to weapons-grade enrichment is getting to 60. Once you're at 60, you're 90% of the way there.
The only thing too late is Powell. Powell's too late. Too late, Powell.
Have you given the order that they can use lethal force against honor? I want the answer to be no. Please tell me it's no.
How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
President Trump says he's still up in the air about direct military involvement in the Israel-Iran war, but says he's still weighing all the options.
Meeting in the war room in a little while, situation room, as some people call it. So we're going to meet, we're going to see. We're in the midst of it's a terrible thing. I hate to see it. I hate to see all that death, so much death and destruction. But death primarily, that's what I hate to see.
Does that mean you haven't made a decision yet on what to do?
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the
And President Trump also said that Iran has allegedly reached out to him to try to even meet at the White House. He says the time for negotiation, though, is over. He's actually putting out a lot of disparate signals out there right now. I think that's by design. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says on the topic of enrichment of uranium, slightly dead is still mostly alive.
When you say 60, that's misleading when people hear that number because they think 60% enrichment and 90% is what you need for a weapon. Actually, 90% of the work it takes to get to weapons-grade enrichment is getting to 60. Once you're at 60, you're 90% of the way there. You are, in essence, a threshold nuclear weapons state.
There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead. Mostly dead is slightly alive.
Marco Rubio has been an excellent messenger and actor so far in the Trump administration in terms of the actions that he's taken. That was not one of the best moments, but I'm not sure how else you're supposed to explain complicated nuclear science in layman's terms. In other news, a major win for sanity, reality, and the good, true, and beautiful at the Supreme Court yesterday. The Supreme Court upheld Tennessee's law that bans meatball surgery and chemical castration for minors in the name of gender. In a 6-3 ruling, the court held that Tennessee's law does not violate the Equal Protections Clause. The majority opinion was written by Chief Justice John Roberts, who said, quote, "This case carries with it the weight of fierce scientific and policy debates about the safety, efficacy, and propriety of medical treatments in an evolving field. The voices in these debates raise sincere concerns. The implications for all are profound. The Equal Protection Clause does not resolve these disagreements. Having concluded it does not, we leave questions regarding its policy to the people, their elected representatives, and the democratic process." So again, a major win for the cause of sanity at the Supreme Court. Here's what this does. It allows all child gender mutilations to stop in states if they so choose. And that is the case in about 25 plus states across the union. The court invalidated transgenderism as its own sex. So sex-based discrimination laws are not relevant. A great win for sanity. The Federal Reserve on Wednesday kept interest rates steady amid expectations of higher inflation and lower economic growth. Still pointed to 2 reductions later on this year. With markets opening, no chance of central bank moves this week. The Federal Open Market Committee kept its key borrowing rate targeted in a range between 4.25% and 4.5%, where it has been since December. Along with the rate cut decision, the committee indicated through its closely watched dot plot that 2 cuts by the end of 2025 are still on the table. However, it lopped off 1 reduction for both 2026 and 2027. President Trump is getting awfully frustrated with Jerome Powell, Fed chair.
trying to get him to do something. I've been nice to him. I do it always. I don't know how to sell. I've been so nice to him, fellas, you wouldn't believe. Let's have dinner. Too late. I'd call him too late. Come on, too late. Let's have dinner. I do it every way in the book. I'm nasty. I'm nice. Nothing works. He's like just a stupid person.
Yeah, tell, I don't know, pick your old school Republican that one of their successors is just going to, out in the open, out in public, in full view of the media, just going to call the Fed Reserve Chair a stupid person. Tell them that that's happening. Tell somebody like HW that that's what's happening right now. Moving on, Elissa Slotkin, that's the Democrats' new poster woman in the Senate, tried to grill Pete Hegseth on the deployment of Marines to Los Angeles.
I love the military. I served alongside my whole life, so I'm worried about you tainting it. Have you given the order? Have you given the order that they can use lethal force against honor? I want the answer to be no. Please tell me it's no. Have you given the order?
Senator, I'd be careful what you read in books and believing it, except for the Bible.
The only thing worse than communism is the gynocracy, and Elissa Slotkin and people like her surely want that to be a reality. Well, it sounds like President Trump and Tucker Carlson, news personality, have patched things up after Carlson got very outspoken in his criticism of the Trump administration's handling of the Israel-Iran issue. Here is President Trump at the Oval Office yesterday.
And it's interesting because I did ask Tucker, I said, well, are you okay with nuclear weapons being in the hands of Iran? And he sort of didn't like that. He didn't want to really, but he sort of didn't like that. And I said, well, if it's okay with you, then you and I do have a difference. But it's really not okay with him. Therefore, you may have to fight, and maybe it'll end, very quickly. But there's no way that you can allow, whether you have to fight or not, you can allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon, because the entire world will blow up. I'm not going to let that happen.
Trump also said that Carlson called him earlier this week to apologize. This is coming off the heels of Carlson's most recent episode this week, literally and figuratively, where he had Senator Ted Cruz, not exactly a Lindsey Graham type on foreign policy. He had him on his podcast to talk about Israel-Iran, tried to get him in a gotcha question.
How many people live in Iran, by the way? I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah,
How could you not know that?
I don't sit around memorizing population tables.
Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government.
Why is it relevant whether it's, it's 90 million or 80 million or 100 million? Why is that relevant?
Because if you don't know anything about the country...
I didn't say I don't know anything about
Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran?
They are Persians and
what
predominantly Shia. Okay,
it's not even... You don't know anything about Iran.
So yeah, that happened. I just want to ask you all, do you know what the airspeed velocity is of a laden Iranian swallow versus an unladen Iranian swallow? I think these are very pertinent debates to resolve in these trying times. That was just utterly sophomoric from Tucker Carlson there. However, there is one part of that interview that I think needs a little bit of attention, especially when it comes to one Mr. Senator Ted Cruz. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. Checking in, another daily vibe check on the Democrats. Here is CNN's Ana Navarro. She used to be a Republican or something, talking about how illegals not being here anymore, getting deported, means that your milk price will go up.
And look, what's going to happen here is that we're going to find that milk gets a lot higher, because I don't know if any of you have ever been in a dairy farm. It is god-awful work. We're going to see that groceries and vegetables are higher. We're going to see an effect in our economy, because whether people like it or not, whether Americans acknowledge it or not, undocumented immigrants are an integral part of our society and our economy.
Who will pick the cotton update? Who will pick the milk update this time around with Ana Navarro? You know, there was a story earlier this week, and I told you about that biggest ICE single-day raid or single workplace raid they did at that Glen Valley Foods in Omaha. Well, there's a story out this week that already there were lines out the door of Glen Valley Foods this week of people lining up to do the jobs of those illegals who had gotten deported. When we come back, absolute poison from another Democrat TV personality. We'll talk about that. Pope Leo addresses the challenges of AI, and it seems like he's pretty serious about it. And we're going to have to put the Poli back in politician sometime sooner or later. That's coming up next.
Have a good, they call it a lifting. They also use another word, but I'm not going to use that word. You know what that is? The word, it starts with an E. You know what the word is? If I ever used it, I'd be run out of town by you people.
I listened to that live yesterday morning. That's President Trump with the crew of workers installing 2 100-foot flagpoles on the north and south side of the White House, bought and paid for by President Trump. He said, let's have a good lifting. They also use another word that starts with E. I listened to that live. I had no idea what in the world he was talking about. And then it occurred to me, if you lift something into the sky that is long and straight, you might call that something that begins with the letter E. Whoopi Goldberg on The View is something else that starts with the letter E. Educated. And you can only be this stupid if you are highly educated. Here she is talking about the difference between Iran and the United States.
And it's slow.
But let's just remember, too, the Iranians literally throw gay people off of buildings. They don't adhere to basic human rights.
Listen, here's the thing. Let's not do that, because if we start with that, we have been known in this country to tie gay folks to the car.
Yes, it is up to them.
And that's why I am saying that it is the same. Murdering someone for their difference is not good, whoever does it. It's not good. So that's why I said...
Murder's not good, clap like seals.
What I heard was not what you meant.
I think it's very different to live in the United States in 2025 than it is to live in Iran.
Not if you're black.
Not for everybody.
Not if you're black.
Guys,
yes, black people living in the United States in the year 2025 are just like homosexuals living in Iran in the year 2025. This is the point where I'm supposed to remind you what a hypocrite. Whoopi Goldberg is worth tens of millions of dollars. That's not what I'm going to say, though. That is absolute 200 proof poison, what she just articulated there. And I would like to say that it's a one-off. I'd like to say that people like Whoopi Goldberg are real, but rare. But there are very much people in this country, swaths of people in this country, I don't know how large, but however large it is too large, who really believe that, who really believe sentiments like that. And that is absolutely poisonous thinking. It is poisonous to believe yourself to be akin to a highly persecuted group of people around the world just based on the color of your skin in some national sin that was resolved because millions of people with different colors of skin fought and died for your right to actually be treated as a human. That is poison. In other developments internationally, Pope Leo XIV has issued a stark warning about artificial intelligence, declaring it a threat to humanity that demands urgent global action, including stringent regulations on big tech. He said in a room full of cardinals at the Vatican in one of his first major addresses as pontiff, quote, "Today the church offers its trove of social teachings to respond to another industrial revolution and to innovations in the field of artificial intelligence that pose challenges to human dignity, justice, and labor." Leo's comments, which were delivered during his first formal audience with the College of Cardinals in the Synod Hall of the Vatican back in May, were reported by the Wall Street Journal this week. The Vatican this week is hosting executives from firms including IBM, Cohere, Anthropic, Palantir, and others for a major summit on AI ethics. Leo is expected to issue written messages, but has not yet held private meetings with the tech CEOs. Microsoft President Brad Smith is expected to meet Vatican officials later this month, and Google is in discussions for a future audience with the Pope. Isn't that an interesting development? All of these companies, in the midst of these crazy stories we've been seeing, and I've read you a few of them, all these major companies are at least virtue signaling to the largest Christian church in the world that they are interested in some ethical teaching and how they implement that in artificial intelligence. This has been one of Pope Leo's when he was a cardinal, and really back before he was even made a cardinal. This has been one of his focuses for years. I believe we played some of his comments, or at least I quoted some of his commentary from many years ago, talking about how he does believe we are witnessing another industrial revolution, one that poses a threat to human dignity. I think he's barking up the right tree. And now here's this. I thought it was rather sophomoric what Tucker Carlson tried to play with Senator Ted Cruz the other day, Do you know how many people live in Iran? You can't possibly have an opinion about Iran if you don't know random facts about Iran. Now tell me, how many chucks could a woodchuck chuck if an Iranian woodchuck could chuck wood? It's just ridiculous. However, there's a clip from that interview that Tucker Carlson himself actually promoted, where Senator Ted Cruz is asked what he believes in terms of biblical prophecy Israel's role is in the future.
Growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of it, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my... You pull out the phone and use the...
It's in Genesis. But so you're quoting a Bible phrase. You don't have context for it and you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology? I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker.
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay. Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two...
Hold on.
Hold
on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel. And what
does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But hold on, define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel, yes.
So is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yeah, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the descendants
God's
of
referring
Abraham.
to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
And by the way, it's not run by Benjamin Netanyahu as a dictator. It's a democratic country that elected.
He's the prime minister.
Right.
What?
But just like, America is the country run by Donald Trump. No, actually, the American people elected Donald Trump. The same principle
This is silly. I'm talking about the political entity of modern Israel.
Yes, and that is
You believe
Israel.
That's what God was talking about in Genesis.
I do, but
that country's existed since when?
For thousands of years. Now, there was a time when it didn't exist, and then it was recreated just over 70 years ago.
I'm saying, I think most people understand that line in Genesis to refer to the Jewish people, God's chosen people.
That's not what it says.
Okay, Israel, but you don't even know where in the Bible it is.
So that is a line of questioning from Tucker Carlson to Senator Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz justifies his support for the current iteration of Israel by quoting from Genesis. Now, there are different interpretations of what that actually means. And it's been fascinating over the past 48 hours to see a lot of evangelical Christians recognize, hey, our view of the end times is not what everybody believes, not what everybody who claims to be a Christian believes. And it's been equally fascinating, if not more fascinating, to find out what non-evangelical Christians find out about what most evangelical Christians believe about Israel. Here's what I have to say. Regardless of what you think of the current day Israel, whether that's the same one as Ted Cruz believes that God is talking about in Genesis, or it's something completely else, which is what Tucker Carlson believes. He doesn't believe there's any prophetic significance to this current iteration of Israel. If you fall into the Ted Cruz category, and especially if you hold elected office, in this day and age, and increasingly in the future, you're going to have to articulate the different perspectives, and you're going to have to hold this in an open hand. Here's what I'm talking about. You're going to have to explain your support of Israel from multiple different perspectives and make the case from multiple different perspectives. You're going to have to put the Poli back in politician. Ted Cruz needs to recognize what he should have said there is, here's what I believe. I believe the background that I come from in Christianity is that we're commanded to support the government of Israel, or Israel, the nation of Israel, as he pointed it. But from a Catholic perspective, they don't see any historical or any future importance of this iteration of Israel. Here's why we need to support them from a geopolitical standpoint. They're our only ally in the Middle East. and I think it's worth it to support them in some form or fashion. It's such a crucial area for international trade, which is the trade system that we run on. Something like that. You're going to have to be nimble and explain things from different perspectives, not just your own. Because there is a large wave that I see coming up in the near future, especially amongst the youth, as Gen Z men continue to go back to church, and they're going back to the Catholic Church, by and large, from what I can see, that do not and will not hold this view of Israel. So if you want to make your case for Middle Eastern foreign policy somewhat Israel-centric, you're going to have to keep that in mind. It's been fascinating, like I said, especially the latter category, seeing some of these, especially Catholics, come to realize what most evangelicals actually believe about Israel. It's anathema to them. And what they believe about the end times is anathema to most evangelicals, who I would wager are probably not aware even that there are other views about how end times prophecy will actually play out. So that's my piece there. I thought what Tucker Carlson tried to pull with Ted Cruz, asking that stupid gotcha question, the trivia question, was dumb. But I did not exactly think that this was a well-researched Harvard debate master answer from Ted Cruz when it came to what he believes about the nation of Israel and his Christian faith. When we come back, we'll hear from you results of the poll of the week that's coming up next. And finally, it's our poll of the week. I asked you, what will the time frame of the Israel-Iran war end up being? I left this fairly open-ended, gave you 4 options. First option I gave you is prolonged and the U.S. will be involved. Another nation-building exercise or a prolonged involvement in another conflict in the Middle East. The second option I gave you is prolonged, but the U.S. will not be involved. Third option is this will be a short conflict and the U.S. will be involved in some way militarily. And the fourth option I gave you is the short option, short campaign, and the U.S. will not be involved. Here are the results. In fourth place, a prolonged operation where the U.S. is not involved. 10% of you think that. In third place, a prolonged war and the U.S. will be involved. 17.6% said that. Second place is a short operation where the U.S. is not involved at all, 30.9%. And the number one answer, a short operation with the U.S. being involved, at 41.2%. Basically, bunker buster time is what the majority, or that's the number one option. There's a fairly evenly divided poll, more than usual. We'll go to Zach first. All the U.S. has to do is drop one bunker buster from a B-2 bomber on the Fordo nuclear site, and it's over. Pretty sure the Supreme Leader is also hiding there. Not sure about that last part, although nobody knows. No civilian knows for sure. I've also seen that he's somewhere in, I think, northeastern Tehran. But yeah, that's kind of the option that won here. Is it's pretty much if you drop a bunker buster on that last remaining nuclear facility, or at least the highly, highly protected one, it's basically ball game over, regardless of if there is regime change. Trevor says, I'm voting short U.S. not involved, as I'm interpreting involvement as direct military action. So you don't think there's going to be any bunker busters, no air action whatsoever, according to Trevor. Tom is next. I'm voting short with no U.S. involvement. Again, I can see that the U.S. may be involved afterwards as assisting with offering cleanup support, which may include assistance to the new regime. So yeah, that kind of fits outside of the options I gave you. Jay Breezy says, I can see a scenario where we get in and help reinstall the Shah of Iran, the son of the one that was taken out, and there will be a more settled Middle East, but maybe it's just hopium on my part. That's what I think everybody who is sane is just hoping for peace, one way or another. Revival or Bust says Trump's very much against forever wars. That's true. He's been on that since before he was for tariffs. He just sees this as a great time to make sure we send Iran's nuclear dreams back decades. This is consistent from Trump and makes total sense. It will be a short engagement. Yep, that's kind of what I voted for, too. It certainly seems like we're gearing up for some sort of big old bomb somewhere, somehow. Jim says, as long as the death to America crowd rules in Iran and the possibility of them acquiring nukes remains, the potential for U.S. involvement in the war looms in perpetuity. The military-industrial complex will see to it that this thing isn't protracted. Well, I think your first sentence there is very on the money. as long as one of the foundational pillars of their worldview, of the mullah's worldview in Iran, is death to America, death to Israel, of course there's always going to be the possibility of U.S. military involvement. TNT says, sorry, Aaron, you're trying to simplify the ongoing debate of what does a country do when another calls continually for its destruction. I don't think I'm simplifying anything. I think I'm just asking people what they think the outcome of this war will be. That's all. In terms of a time frame, that's really all that this is. Just trying to get a pulse for what the mood actually is at the moment. That'll do it for a Thursday. Ask or Tell Me Anything. Tomorrow, you can ask me any question you want. Tell me any news story you think needs reported on the AM Update. Make your submissions at Real AM Update on X, at Real AM Update on X. Hope to see a lot of you tomorrow for Ask or Tell Me Anything. Have a great Thursday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.